Hello, I'm Aloni Bhatt, and welcome to Day 2 of Future of Work Mini Virtual Summit. This is part of the larger Future series, which includes Future of Jobs and Education. In the Future series, we look at how technology, digitalization, and the need to be sustainable are shaping all our endeavors, the impact that it's having on us as workers, and the work that we do, and how it's reshaping the idea of workplaces. On day 2 of the ET Future of Work Mini Summit, I'm very happy to welcome Sriram Gopalswamy. He's the VP SRE and MD, Sabre Bengaluru GCC. Sabre is a leading software and technology company powering the global travel industry, and it serves a wide range of companies, including airlines, hotels, travel agencies, and other suppliers. Sriram, welcome to Economic Times, and we're very happy to have you here with us to share your thoughts on how travel and tech will shape the future of work and workplaces.
Yeah, thank you, Melanie. Happy to be here.
All right. We're very happy to have you here with us and excited to get the conversation started. So let me begin with remote work, which has already come into play with the pandemic, enabled so many people to work from anywhere. And then, then we have this term digital nomads who combine all their passion for travel and for work. Airbnb survey showed that 80% of Indians are planning to work while traveling. Talk to us from your standpoint, how travel and remote work will play an integral part in shaping the future of the workplace.
Yeah, very good question to start off, I think, right? And all of us are passionate about traveling, and that's one of the reasons why I chose to be doing what I'm doing, right? I think it's travel is an integral part of human evolution itself, right? All of us became who we are because of the travel that we have done, right? Because of the people we have seen, cultures we have seen, and places we have visited. So, and travel plays a very significant role in today's context. Like what you said, right? There are tons of people who don't want to be based on a single location. With the whole advantage that we have today of internet and ubiquitous 5G availability and so on, right? People could really travel anywhere and be connected and be working. Recently, I was in a trip, a motorbike trip to Ladakh. We saw a bunch of young people, right? Really young, in their early 20s. We saw them at a place called Satchu. So they were saying they are from Bangalore, driving all the way to Goa. It started raining in Goa for them. We were in June, July of last year. They hit the hills, right, all the way to Ladakh. And they were working from there. You know what they were working on? They were paid to play online poker. They were all poker players, right? So that's the kind of influence travel has, and today's world gives us the opportunity to do such stuff, right? And if you see what is happening, a lot of people are clubbing business and leisure, right? There is in fact a new term called leisure, right? Meaning you're traveling for business, but you also want to look at the local place, right? Look at what's around, right? And look at the culture there, look at people there, and so on. So it's just fantastic. The way where we have come, right? This is the day probably all human race have worked together to see, right? We are so fortunate to live in a place, live in an era where we can see all these things. And as a company, Sabre really empowers this, meaning we give the experience that these travelers want for them to be able to get these travel bookings done, right? It's just not a travel ticket, right, anymore. It's a travel experience that can be offered based on tons of customizations that is possible. And that's where Sabre is spending a lot of its time, energy, money, right, in making sure that we really change the way people travel. Now, I should say, to really change the world, people travel and work, right? That's how I see the future of travel and work together, Milan.
All right, very interesting. And, we'd like to get into this a little bit more. This digital nomad culture and the leisure, the leisure travel or whatever, the business plus combination of business and leisure travel. How do you see this all impacting the industry? How are you leveraging it? And, how are you, as you said, enabling and empowering it?
Okay, so today travel is all about experience and personalization, right? So when I'm saying it's ultra personalization, right? So people are looking for recommendations that is coming in from the place where you're sourcing the ticket. So we are a B2B player, right? So we are not a B2C player where you come and book a ticket from us, but we power. If you look at what Sabre does, right? Many of the large OTAs you think, right? All of them are kind of powered through our distribution and our database at the back end, right? All the information that you get, right? When you go and search, when you have your persona, we basically map it to the persona of others who have similar interests to yours, right? Similar age group, similar demographics, the places, destination you travel, and so on. And then we apply a ton of machine learning and AI on top of it and ultra personalize this for an experience for you, right? So, for example, if you are from a different generation, right? The music you listen to is different. The place you hang out is different. Your favorite drink is different, right? Your favorite player is different. Everything is different. So this customizes, right? So, for example, if I'm traveling there, probably a rock band that would be suggested is different. Whereas if an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old is traveling to a place and a rock band is performing there, right? So definitely, I'm not going to get the Justin Bieber recommendation, right? Whereas a 20-year-old would get a Justin Bieber recommendation. So it's ultra personalization, and that ultra personalization basically curates an experience for everybody who's there. So specifically talking about a question of digital nomads and people who are traveling for leisure, right? This segment is very important to us because they are using our services, right? And we want to cater to them end to end, and not just by booking a ticket or a hotel or a capsule where they can work from, right? Instead of that, just go beyond and give that whole experience to them and keep it live and keep it engaging with them is where we are going with. So what we are trying to do is get several service providers or several travel service providers or several travel and business service providers into the same marketplace where all these services can be available as a form of API, right, to all the booking engines and to all the OTAs and to the brick and mortar agencies who basically arrange these travel for the travelers worldwide and for the basic digital nomads worldwide.
All right. Any interesting data points that are emerging out of all of this, Sriram, over the last 2-3 years? You know, when you look at this growing culture where people are combining work and leisure, you know, it's not just about travel, it's also about the entire experience, you know, where two worlds, actually, the world of work and the world of leisure are kind of merging. So any interesting data points for India that are emerging?
Okay, okay, it's not, I don't have a specific data point of how the leisure place, right, or people who are traveling for work and leisure we have. But if you see the amount of travel that Indians are doing is just phenomenal, right? If you look at the recent order book that Air India did, right? A phenomenal number, 420 aircrafts, right? Record history order that was placed, right? If you look at before this, it was another Indian company, which was Indigo, which had the forward-looking number of airplanes ordered from the big airplane manufacturers, right? So the big trend is, I think last year, Indigo had close to 95 million PBs, meaning 95 million passengers boarded in India. This is just phenomenal, and we are at the tip of the iceberg, I should say, right? If you hit the kind of boarding and the CAGR of people traveling year on year increasing is very consistent, right? And India is going to be a great market for this, not only domestically, but also international locations. Even in the year of 2022, where the travel was said to be at a low point, right? We had several million Indians traveling, to be precise, close to 75 million Indians traveling abroad. Even in 2022, where we had four months of COVID in the beginning, and we had like 8 months probably, right, where we had travel. Even in that, there is record number of people who are traveling internationally. So India is a great place for travel, and Sabre is like super interested in the talent, in the kind of business opportunities that is there, in the power of youth that is there, in the amount of travel they do. It's a great opportunity for any travel provider, any travel service provider to be operating in this market right now.
Right, and as you said earlier, tech underpins all of it and, is making so many things possible. Sriram, talk to us about that, right? Like this merging, this coming together of travel tech, what are the sort of opportunities that you see that it can create? There is so much that, that we as travelers experience, right? Like, for instance, contactless payment. What are the other sort of digital services that are helping to boost the travel tech industry?
See, a lot of times you are asked, right? What do you see, or how do you see this shaping up, right? I see this, it's not like a one trend that's going to shape travel, it's a confluence, right? Meaning multiple pieces of tech that is coming together and coming of age, right? A lot of things have been existing for quite a long time, but when everything comes to an age, that confluence of technologies make a big difference. So that is happening while we are speaking, right? You spoke about virtual payments, right? It's about the advancement that's there in the fintech industry, the advancements that's there in the AR VR space, the advancements that is there in content creation, right? Let's look at content creation and the number of people today who are taking content creation as their full-time job, right? Whether it is content creation for Insta, whether content creation for YouTube, or becoming a local guide and writing content about the interesting places and interesting things they are observing and so on, right? All these data that were traditionally in how do I say it, in a tribal form are becoming digital, right? Earlier, if you have to eat the best samosa of say Rajasthan, right, you have to be there, you have to know a friend who probably knows this place, who will take you there. Today, I just go to YouTube and I say that the best samosa of Rajasthan, you will get like the top 2, 3, you know really what it is, how many years they have been, and you can go, right? The digitization of this tribal knowledge that existed is aiding travel and kind of influencing travel decisions heavily, whether it is the local guides who are doing this, whether it is the other people who are producing content for their livelihood, or we are talking about innovations that is happening on the fintech platform. Just let's take, for example, what's happening with the fintech platform, right? The whole Jan Trinity, right? The Jandan, Aadhaar, and the mobile Trinity has kind of revolutionized the way we pay, way we look at payments, right? If I go and talk to somebody that we used to write a check and it will take 5 days for you to get to the bank and it will take 2 days for that bank to realize it and so on, right? People will look at you like dinosaurs today, right? But this technology did not exist 4 years ago, right? All this, the confluence of stuff that's happening. And it is not only making sense for the end consumer of this technology, but also impacting the people who are receiving on the other side. Meaning, what you as a person is making payments on a digital platform to another person, right? And then the bank of the other person knows that this person is getting 100 credits every day through UPI, right? And they don't need to have a CIBIL, they don't need to have any kind of getting into the financial system. Even in the rural India, a person who is making a purse, a person who is selling something, selling online, he is getting UPI credits. Your bank, who is basically who he is banking with, would know that this person is getting 200 credits a day, which means that I can give a loan to him and not worry about the NPA because of what is happening to him over the past 6 months, that he was probably selling the same produce as cash and getting it, right? So you never record these transactions. Today, every transaction is recorded, and the power of recording it makes so many intelligent decisions for the fintech. We are talking only from the consumer point of view, making it easy. But if you look at the other place where the banks are more interested in, is the analytics that can happen on all these digital transactions that are recorded, right? And in the travel world today, you can talk about travel now and pay later for people. You're talking about peer-to-peer lending, right? So a lot of these interesting things are influencing the travel and the travel behavior of people. Earlier, you have to have the whole plan and money, the cash and everything to travel. Today, with the support of the fintech, with the support of the intelligent data availability and the banks mining these data, they are able to make travel now and pay later kind of concepts, and that is picking up heavily, right? This confluence of technology, as I said, right, whether it is the local guide making a tribal information digital, the fintech players coming and making all payments recorded and making it a digital record there, allowing us to mine on this data and make intelligent decision, and the travel tech itself changing heavily, right, with the advent of apps and advent of all the modern availability of technology for us, right, the distribution capabilities that is increasing and so on. All this kind of frames an interesting confluence, and that is making the world more interesting, Melanie. That's how I see it.
Right, and how will, paint us a picture of how you see all of this influencing the future of work?
Yeah, it's going to be very different, right? A lot of work jobs that we thought we had 3 years, 4 years, we didn't think, right? For example, a cloud architect, right? Every company has a cloud architect today, right? Cloud data specialists, right? We are talking about CISOs, right? Meaning the people who will be responsible for cyber security of your offices. Mm-hmm. These roles did not exist 5 years, 7 years ago, right? So there is going to be a lot of impact of technology on the jobs that are existing, meaning there can be jobs that will be come and taken away by technology, right? With the advent of real smart AI, right? Jobs like lawyers, right? Jobs like professionals like doctors, right? Professionals. Right. It's going to change, right? I'm like, you can be only a smart doctor of the amount of screening you have done and the amount of diagnosis that you've done. If I'm going to feed the smartest AI system with several millions of diagnoses that it has done, it's going to be very interesting, right? It's going to outsmart the best doctor we know, right? So there's going to be a place, a confluence that I see where travel, where the technology is going to play side by side with human, right? It's not like robots doing its job and humans doing its job in the mechanism. Robot does a certain portion of it, comes to the human being, he does certain portion, goes to the robot, and again comes back to the human. That's not going to be the future of work, I see. It's going to be the future where an ecosystem where they're going to kind of be working together, right? Taking information from each other and working. That's going to be the future. And there's going to be a ton of new jobs that is created as well because of this. There's going to be one side, and people have to reskill, and you cannot stop technology, right? You can find about it saying, oh, this is going to come and take all our jobs. All translators are going to lose jobs, or everybody who's basically behind the screen today and working like a chatbot, right? They have information, they physically sit and type information. With the intelligent AI, now we are seeing what's happening with several new AI technologies that is breeding, right? So they are able to make human-like conversations, right? It's just stunning to see how they are reacting, right? How much of human emotions they are able to bring in, right? So recently we were playing with one such offering. It even says when you're talking or when you're typing to it for a long time, it even makes a sound like right? It's just unbelievable.
So intuitive, yeah.
So intuitive, right? It knows that you're thinking, you're typing, it wants to kind of nudge you forward. So that is what is happening in the space. There's going to be a lot of new jobs that is created in terms of content, in terms of data analysis, in terms of AI, in terms of ML, in terms of AR, VR, right? In terms of local guides, right? So it has to happen. And there's and the landscape would change, I feel, right? A lot of things that are tribal today, for young people, I would really say anything that is tribal, that is not digital or that is not full-time digital, look at that area. There is a big scope. Anything you take like that has a big scope, right? You visit a great monument in India, or you go to Machu Picchu, you want to have a guide with you, right? So imagine today with the beacon technology, with the IoTs that is present, with 5G that is present, and you have a smartphone which is 100x smarter than the computer that put the man on the moon, right? So you have it all today in your pocket, right? So any form of digitization of tribal knowledge that is existing is going to be the place for human beings. is how I see it. And a lot of place would be taken by humanoids. And that's the future that we have to be ready with. In our lifetime, I would not be surprised if you are walking with a humanoid on the road.
Wow, exciting, interesting future you paint for us, Sriram. But this is my last question to you. People and businesses are also talking of sustainability. How do businesses in the travel tech space and people in the travel tech space balance the issues of accessibility, inclusivity, and sustainability?
Again, right, this is something that we're very passionate about at our company. In fact, we had recently have our chief ESG officer appointed, right, where they'll totally worry about environment and safety and what's happening, the imprint or the footprint that we leave on the environment because of everything is large, right? But there are two ways to look at it. One is we have to be extremely careful about the carbon footprint we leave, right? Probably you go, say, 60 years, 50 years before to us, a lot of human beings who lived on this planet left a negative carbon footprint. A lot of them, right, left a negative footprint. And this was the way of life a lot of us, probably one generation ago, had in our villages, right? So we basically plugged a leaf from our backyard, ate it, put it, and then the whole thing was all carbon neutral and so on. Today, the amount of energy we consume and the amount of energy we spend, whether it's in the form of direct burning of coal, right, or any fossil or anything of the sort, right? If we are not sustainable, we'll not be leaving a good planet to our next generation. So we'll have to be very careful about it. That's one side of me, right? The other technology side of me says that I think in few years from now, we will have abundant energy without burning fossil, right? We are very, very close to the amount of solar energy that we can reap, the wind energy that we can reap. We are talking about batteries that are sustainable, where we can harness the solar energy and save and reuse and so on, right? I feel we are not far away, probably 5 years, 10 years. I think we will be in a place where we are not burning fossil fuel as a majority source, which is today, right? That's the tech part of it, right? There is a lot of research and development that is happening on sustainable energy across the world in different places, and there are several breakthroughs that are happening while we are speaking, right? So that is one side of it. And your next thing was very interesting thing on the equality and the equity aspect of how we have to be. I think as a human race, we are. It's a place where it's a shift that we are having from being a total social being to something who's a little lesser social being, I would say. In the one, so recently we had about 850 of our executives travel to Dallas, and we had a big conference of all our top leaders of the company, right? There were a few of them who said, I've not seen so many people in like 3 years. I think I've forgotten my social skills, right? So it is, I think we are, it's becoming natural to us because of our schedule, because of the work from anywhere and what we are doing and so on, right? It is happening. So we have to bring back that social element into it, and it's very important that we treat people with equality. It is just not with gender. We recently celebrated the International Women's Day on March the 8th. This was a big thing for Sabre, right? We want to be equitable to everybody. We want to be treating everybody equal, right? If you are not creating a place like that, I think all these advancements that we have had would be of no use, right? Whether it is of gender, whether it is of color, whether it is of a sexual orientation, right? Whether it is of a language, region, right? Creed and so on. I think getting to a place where we all can bring our complete self to work and be productive at our work is what we aim for. And I think that's that's very important if we have to leave a better planet in the hands of our next generation.
All right. Sriram, it's absolutely a great sentiment because it's true. At the end of the day, issues of sustainability and issues of inclusivity, uh, they include all of us, and it's important for all companies to take equal cognizance of it and ensure that our work culture also embodies all of these things. But it's been a real pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so very much for giving us your time and sharing your thoughts today.
Thank you. Thank you, Salome. Thank you very much.
Hello and welcome to this panel at the Future of Work Mini Virtual Summit. I'm Meloni Bhatt. In today's digital world, everyone is connected, but possibly apart, where workplaces could be your dining table or the corner coffee shop, or maybe your office twice a week. It's possible that you may have been working for over a year and yet not have met most of your colleagues, collaborating over calls and perhaps with other digital tools. The entire definition of work, workplace changes, and this greatly impacts our experience, not just with the office, but also our colleagues. Today, I have with me two top HR professionals, and they are going to help us understand, how companies are rethinking the employee experience in a digital-first world. First up, I'd like to introduce Sonal Jain. She's the head of People Asia Pacific at Coursera. Sonal, welcome.
Thank you so much.
And joining us is Anupreeta Lall. She's the founder of IntellSearch, a boutique search firm. Anupreeta, welcome to Economic Times.
Thank you so much. Pleasure being here.
All right, it's wonderful. And, I'd like to dive right into the conversation. Now, due to COVID-19 pandemic, work from home, remote work has all become the new norm, and digitalization has allowed all of this to happen. The last 2 years have also proved to us that productivity has not suffered because of the work from home model. Remote work has changed the way in which organizations need to manage the employee experience. And a lot of older methods may not be applicable. And there are reports that tell us that a lot of remote workers lack a sense of belonging. So Sonal, if we could start with you, can you talk about the methods and tools that organizations can use to adapt to these changes that have occurred because of digitalization?
Yes. Sure. So first of all, thank you so much for having me here. And it's such a big pleasure to be with Economic Times always. One, it's become a norm. Earlier, it was more around, I'm based out of Bombay and I'm going to travel XYZ location. But now it's a norm. Everybody is working remote and hybrid in one form and the other. Second is what has changed is how do we connect with each other? And earlier it was only a Zoom call, earlier it used to be a phone call or maybe a WebEx at the max, if I'm not wrong. But, now there are multiple technologies for collaboration and engaging with each other. So that's changed. Earlier, we used to engage with all our five senses, whether how do we eat together, how do we speak together, how do we hear. Today, most of a connection sometimes is just the voice. And what strikes me is the voice becomes the hook today, because even on a virtual call, even on a Zoom meeting, not everybody is on with the Zoom video. And hence, our connection to the voice, which means the way our mind interprets, our heart interprets the voice, has become so important. I'm not sure if we are truly trained to hear the voice, accept the voice, and understand different emotions going behind the voice. That to me is like a big aha as I learned through the journey of remote work. And what has changed is really the ecosystem, because everybody is going through a big change. I think what has also changed at last, and I can go on and on, but I'll just keep it to the last one, is conflict management and alignment. Because in the past, even if we had a bit of argument and bit of debate and, conflict, we would walk up to the person only in that location and have a cup of tea. If I had a conflict with somebody sitting out of Singapore, I still couldn't walk up to that person. I still had to resolve conflict through a virtual world. But now that has really become large. So the scope has become large because now today, if I have a conflict, I have to resolve with everybody through a virtual mechanism and not by meeting each other, right? So to me, coming back to your question, productivity is really about combination of all of this. And there is no or, there's only and, because everything makes an integral part of that connection building. And hence, what's the productive outcome? And to me, finally, it's about whether all of this helps us survive or helps us thrive. And this has been sort of my key phrase since the time COVID had come in, surviving to thriving. Some of us are still surviving in some aspects, trying to understand the virtual world. And some of us have found our own mechanisms to thrive in the same virtual world across. So I think that's where I link all of this to productivity, and it's about bringing all of that together. And maybe, and as a follow-up question later, I'll also share what some of the things we are doing in my perspective at Coursera to bring the tools, technologies to making it a great experience.
Sure, we'd love to hear, but this is interesting. I mean, you've laid out when it comes to productivity, how it connects with so many things when it comes to employees and so many experiences at so many levels, and how actually it is a tie between all of these things. Anupreeta, but now what's also happening is that while employees are okay with the hybrid or also adapting to working from home, working remotely. There are younger generations who are expecting a certain level of flexibility. But then you have companies, and a lot of them legacy companies. Many employers are now enforcing very strong work from office mandates, and in that way, disrupting for which for a lot of people has become the sort of an experience that they want to have from a workplace. How do you see this shift playing out, both from the perspective of employers and from the perspective of employees? Obviously, Sonal has told us that hybrid is the way to go. That's changed, and that will remain so.
Yes, what you said is something which is somewhere playing a sort of creating a disruptive scenario. But then there are two aspects of looking at it. So if we just go a few years back, then very few had actually heard of work from home. If we just leave the tech companies aside, so any organization which was not device led was working from office. Tech companies, obviously, since they were device led, many of them had already been working remote or hybrid from quite some time. When the pandemic hit, most of the organizations hadn't projected for the fact that life is going to be very different all of a sudden. Now, as you mentioned, some of the old school organizations, again, who are the ones who are implementing these rules? It comes from the decision makers, but the ones who execute it are the frontline or the mid-level managers or the executioners. Now that mindset really needs to change. So the first thing that we need to do is leave the baggage of preconceived ideas and notions behind, because today people have experienced almost 2+ years of hybrid. They've understood that anything that we had thought was a norm isn't necessarily so. So if we thought that a 9-to-5 work environment was required, we just proved that it wasn't. I mean, every organization, or at least most organizations, gave the flexibility to, work, and productivity, which we always thought was related to, how many hours you spent in the office, never got hampered. I mean, organizations have actually come up and said that, yes, we have actually done as good or much better than what we had been doing, all by extending some sort of a flexible work hours or, working from home, hybrid, whatever it is, to the employees. Now, there is a generation which has just started work way back in 2019 or 20. They now know only, the hybrid or the work from home. And they're digital one people. So they've not heard of anything else. So for them, this is the way of life and this is the norm. People, so if you ask me personally, how would I feel about either working from home or working from office? To me, it doesn't matter. For me, it's okay. I mean, I'll try and balance. This generation is not going to balance. They know this is the norm. They have last 2 years worked against all odds, given their 100%, and they would expect this to continue. Organizations, if you take it from their perspective, supposing it's an assembly line, where some sort of a manufacturing is taking place, they can't work from home. That workforce needs to be there at the assembly line. Or healthcare. Now, healthcare workers can't work from home. Same as service industry. You can't expect a chef to be working from home. So there are certain industries where it is not possible to be working from home because your physical presence is required. However, there are organizations which are again device led. You can work from any location and it's not going to make any change either for the organization or for the employee. On the contrary, we have like these 2 years have proven that productivity is something which is not linked A to the physical presence and B to the fact that the number of hours that you spend. So we now know that this is done and can be done. So again, device led, it's okay to be working from anywhere. If the industry or the organization is such where it's a service industry or a healthcare sector or wherever that your physical presence is required, then there is no alternative to that. Having said that, any organization which is based on creativity, I think that we can always say proudly that most of the people, their creative juices can be flowing at any point of time. And that doesn't necessarily be at 9:15 sharp. So for them, it is something you can be working out of nowhere and they're going to give their best because they are not in that mental anxiety or a space where, they're bound by a clock and there is some sort of a surveillance going on as to what you deliver and in how short a span or how long a span you deliver. So this is something which is very relative. And while organizations which require the workforce to be there, that part can be understood. The other organizations will have to rethink because the way forward is definitely not going to be with, that kind of bureaucratic red tapeism where, this is the rule and the norm, because there is a workforce which has seen it is not the norm, experienced it, and they're not willing to compromise today.
All right. But, if we could speak about when it comes to, motivation and how satisfied employers and employees are, Anupreeta, to continue with you, and we've had all of these things, right? The great resignation, we've had quiet quitting, and all of these terms that have now come to define our experiences at work, and what employers and employees are going through. And maybe that is, something which is left over from the pandemic. And as Sonal mentioned, that, for a lot of us, maybe we've moved on. Some of us are still struggling. How do you see this all impacting satisfaction and motivation and the ability of companies, and especially the HR, in managing that when it comes to employees?
So there was a very interesting survey by Stoke recently, which actually, so if we talk of EX and that also in the digital space, this survey actually threw up very things that people could never even think about. So they came up with actually a 5 aspects of EX, which is having a very positive impact on the workforce. And there were things that we could not even have given a second thought. Access to daylight. Now, who would have thought that access to daylight can be a motivation? But it is. Increased flexibility in work hours. That we can understand that, flexibility, that is still something that we know. Connection to nature. Now, who had thought that sitting amongst your lawn with a mug of coffee in your hand is actually something which is a big motivation, or anywhere, even in your organization. If you just go down and sit in the lawn and you have greenery around you. But it came forward as something where for every 5 employees that they actually questioned, 2.5 said that this is a big motivation. Then physical health. Now, this is again something which we can understand keeping these 2 years in mind, that physical health is something that employees are actually paying a lot of attention to, and by default, the organization is forced to pay attention to that. And then hybrid work policy, again, we had known. But these 5 which actually came to the fore are physical attributes which motivate the workforce when it is working in a digital space or work from home, hybrid, whatever it is. If we just, just ignore the last 2-3 years, and we go back to the age-old employee engagement that we spoke about, what was it? It was finally about, the values that one creates, the organization culture, what is new about the job, which is adding value to me as well as the organization. And these are what were called the emotional aspects. These were what were actually motivating the workforce. And today, these are again the same things which are motivating the workforce, again, even if it is a digital first environment. And what has is, trust, happiness, belongingness, sense of achievement. So when a employee actually sits at home and feels that he or she is sort of cut off from the organization, then there is a fear that I do not belong or I'm missing out on something. Now, this is where the HR comes into play. Any organization who feels, any employee who feels insecure, see, this pandemic threw a lot of insecurities, whether it was about the job per se, health, workplace insecurity, whether I'm missing out on something. Now, what happened? These were some things that actually played havoc with an employee's motivation level. So this is where today, in a digital first, or rather in any kind of environment, this is always applicable, where the HR needs to actually have a system in place where you have and understand the pain points of the employees, where these fears are coming from, how they feel that these can be addressed. Colleagues who have been through the same can actually sort of, work out on a protocol which can be later used for everybody across the workforce. And these are going to help. Same way, there's a huge level of anxiety when you're working either hybrid or work from home, remote, about 24/7 responsibility to respond to the whether it is mail or any kind of communication. Now, even if a person has sort of taken a leave from work for whatever reason, he or she feels the pressure to be connected to one of the device so that he or she doesn't miss out on something. And it doesn't end with a backlash of any kind of losing work or some client feedback that or some information that was important you're missing out. So this 24/7 stress is also something that HR needs to address. So previously it was called work from home. But what happened is, we started, the family started living in an office space. Now that also plays havoc with the person's psyche, because there's a child who's going online school. The spouse is also on 24/7 calls. We are the sandwich generation. So we have parents to take care of as well as children to take care of. And there's online classes going on for one, and the other one, it's their morning puja routine, which they switch on the TV and look at it. So, this trying to balance everything again sort of puts a person on the back foot, where they feel that they're not equipped to deal. This is again where the HR comes into play, and there has to be a boundary between a personal space and a workspace, even if you're sitting within the confines of your home, because that needs to be drawn. Then secondly, there's another physical aspect. When there are offices which have been, designed keeping in mind the how well they engage employees. This is a lucrative office. There's some vastu there. We are thinking of, green space, mirrors, people feel nice. And then suddenly they are in this 2 BHK accommodation shared by 7 of them, including parents. Now, whatever that productivity that the organization had initially thought of, keeping in mind the different kind of office space or the open work environment, that has changed. So there are people who actually come and say that, we'd rather work from office, because for them that productivity suddenly linked to the fact that I can't deliver here with so much happening in the same space. So space is again something that the HR will have to demarcate, that, okay, this is something that we'll have to look at. Understand, any engagement is of no use unless it involves everybody. And the workforce, if it is not part of the feedback system, or when we're not discussing the pain points or what they would like, then it is a wastage. So this is where HR comes into play, whether it is feedback, whether it is taking their pain points, whether it is even the personalization of policies. We cannot have a cookie cutter approach to things. We have actually moved way beyond that. We can't have a cookie one size fits all, because no, there could be baby boomer who values something else. And then there is this, whatever they are called, the digital one, who's self before anything else. And that is totally okay. I mean, it's totally okay, because they say if we don't care for ourselves, who will? And I'm sure none of us have answers to that. So, keeping in mind the different age groups, the different geographies, the different time spans, and the different values that they attach to, this is somewhere that the HR will actually have to bring the frontline managers, the workforce, and the leadership on the same platform. Unless we do that.
Anupreeta, you actually laid out the canvas for the next question that I had in mind. How can HR adapt, and what are the challenges that HR faces? But before we actually get into that, there's something I'd like to ask you, Sonal. You are now working in an organization which is 100% remote, right? How do you build culture in such an organization? Because Anupreeta made a reference to culture and how culture is important. And, you also spoke about the culture of an organization and how it drives, or how it can be a marker for a lot of employees. So that's one. And second is, there's so much of talk about diversity and inclusion. But if you are in a largely digitized setting, what happens to diversity and inclusion?
While we are a fully remote organization, we still have some offices across the world, because we might still have a couple of our employees on one day that they actually say, today I really want an office to work, right? So we still have some offices in some of our countries and locations. Now, I might be in a location like I am, my home location is Mumbai. Today I am at IIT Guwahati, but my location is Mumbai. And hence I don't have an office in Mumbai. So what happens? But second aspect of our fully remote organization is we have access to WeWork location across the world, which means that if we need to have a client meeting, if I want to have a team meeting, we can actually access through a WeWork location across the world. So when I went to Singapore, when I was in New York, you just have to get a WeWork access location and then you have to go and work. So there is access to some physical space that you can work out of. Third is, I stay in a location where actually WeWork does not exist. So does that mean I don't have access to some physical space beyond my home? And we've just rolled out a policy worldwide where we said you just need to have an access to co-working space. So if WeWork is not there, office is not there, but there is a co-working space that you want to have access to, you can have access to the co-working space, right? So the variety and the spectrum of access to a physical space beyond your home exist, which creates that environment that Anupreeta was talking about, right? And some of these WeWork and co-working spaces are really nice. They actually provide the kind of space that one would look forward to when you go to an office, right? So they're very high quality, maintained. So that's about the physical space and experience and getting teams together. Then I would call out, culture gets formed with the experiences that people experience in an organization, and that also comes through how we work together and ought to be delivered together. So a couple of tools that actually works very well for us here. One is, for example, we call it our OKR systems, which means what do we achieve, how do we achieve when we come together, and hence how do we make ourselves accountable. Second is for all of us to understand how are we interconnected and what's our interdependability as we work together. And it's an extremely important piece of work, because when we used to work in a fully office kind of a setup, it was much easier, call the teams together and work gets done. But now I think defining it is very important, saying if you were to deliver XYZ, these are the 5 kinds of teams of people that will be required. So that's second. Third is, how do you make decisions? So we have something called as rapid framework in Coursera, which clearly defines who's the person who's going to recommend, who's the person who's going to give inputs, who are the people who are going to perform it, and so on and so forth, right? So really defining how do you make decision here. And hence it also helps conflict management, right? So, I'm a person who wants to be the decision maker, for example, but you know what? You're not the decision maker. You're actually an input provider. But how do you ensure that you are providing input into the process of decision making? So that's very clearly, I would say, defined here. Fourth is around the feedback mechanism. So do we wait for the feedback, or is that something that we can actually make on an ongoing basis? So feedback mechanism. Fifth, I will call out as tools available. And this is my big learning after I joined Coursera. And I personally believe right now that I've fallen in love with some of these tools because earlier I used to work on a lot of presentations, but now the opportunity to collaborate on Google Documents is amazing. So you don't have to check for your version controls, but everybody can actually work on the same document at the same time. So that's fabulous. In the workspace we were used to throughout our lives, we would get into a conference meeting room and say, hey, come here, 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, and let's just work together. Here, through our Slack channels, you can actually create teams in the real time, come together for discussing a topic. So for example, you know what, somebody in my team is getting promoted. Can we look forward to the feedback? Or, hey, we actually discussed about a theme in a project. Where are we on a quick update? So you can create those quick Slack channels and then you can just move away from it. So it almost gives a feeling and a belief that you're not missing out of quickly coming together, making decisions, bringing teams together. So on the same team, if you suddenly feel, oh my God, the person B is missing out because the person B is so important person in actually this conversation, you can quickly add that person to the channel, right? And the person can respond when the person is available. So nothing is lost in the conversation. I've forgotten the number, but I think it's the number 6 is important, is how do we connect? And we still believe that connections are very important beyond the virtual world. So we are really setting up, how do we meet as a leadership team? How do we meet as teams in business lines? How do we meet as a functional team? And then if you're not part of any one of them, how do we meet as a Coursera employee? There is an identity because you belong to the same organization that I belong to, right? And hence, how do you connect? So maybe we connect once a month when we actually come together on a monthly meet. And it's very important. We just had that meet last week, and the energy in the locations that people meet was amazing. So how do you build those connections? Still an opportunity. Anupreeta very, very passionately talked about health. So how do we ensure that even in a remote organization, health of our employees are taken care of? How do we ensure we have tools? We have something called as modern health, where people can actually choose professional coaching and the therapy as well. And most of the companies have therapy through EAP counselors. But in the remote organization, if you just want to have a professional coach, how can you just access coach on a click? So how do you have the accessibility to the resource of coaching? Then comes, I think it's 8th of it, is how do we learn together? How do we build our skills together? Is it known? Is it not known? We have something called as rubrics, which is really defined in terms of the skill competency. I would say skills required for each of the jobs that are required, and hence how do you learn? We ourselves are an online learning platform, and hence our own employees, how do they access learning and development for their own selves? And then finally, most important piece is I'm available. I'm available when it's needed. And I think that is what a lot of us built on when we worked in a physical space, whether it was fully in the office or in a hybrid work or in a remote work. I think that sense of compassion that I'm available when you need me in your time and not in my time only, right? So because we also work completely in different time zones, is a tool, I would say, or a resource which is very valuable in a company like ours when we are fully remote, in my experience. So those are a couple of things I would call out in our organization, which is fully remote. But I think we are trying to build those experiences of our employees so that in turn, sort of that translate into the experiences we are trying to create for our consumers, customers, and our own people at the end.
All right, and we wish you great success with it. But Anupreeta, going back to what we were speaking on, which is how HR has possibly had to adapt the most, moving from a fairly straitjacketed, static work function, visibly at least to a lot of employees pre-pandemic, to a completely new way of engaging with workers, after the pandemic and now ongoing. Would you say that, HR has been able to adapt, or, what are the challenges yet for HR teams?
So HR has never had it so good to their credit as it has been in the last 2 years. Because everybody has noticed how well they have adapted across sectors, across industries, across organizations. If there was one team which was like totally into it and was supporting the business function like never before, it was the HR teams. And across, all across. So if today, HR really needs to find a place at the board level, it is because of the hard work that they've been putting in all the while, specifically in the last 2 years. Having said that, yes, the challenges are there because end of the day, who are they dealing with? The workforce. And workforce is a live resource with emotions, with priorities, which are ever changing.
Right.
And last few years, they have changed like never before because they have seen change, they have accepted that change, and then they have realized and reaped the benefits of that change. So today, when HR has to function as a team, they have to think of 2 to 3 different things that they have to bring to the fore. And the first is personalization. So when I talk of personalization, it has to be about the way they communicate, the way policies are framed, the way jobs across the organization are framed, because there is no one size fits all when it comes to the people 2 years post pandemic. Because today they have seen that they are in a position where there's a lot on the platter to be offered, and if you won't offer, we will offer. Because once the business has started ambling back to normalcy, what has happened is, I mean, if we don't go into detail, but the great resignation or the quiet hiring or the quiet firing, you see there are lots of things which have been happening. And the one person in the center of this has been the workforce. So they know what they can do and they know what they need. Keeping that in mind, the HR has to adapt accordingly. So any policies which are framed, the HR has to be sure that it has to be personalized. It has to keep in mind the workforce, and end of the day, no policy or nothing can be framed when there is, the stakeholders are knocking at your door. End of the day, every business is about profitability. You have to keep that in mind. There are investors willing to walk out if you don't deliver on time, and they are least concerned what your employee practices are. While it might be of extreme importance, they want quick returns. A stakeholder wants quick return, a VC wants quick return. And any CEO or a leader or the HR team has to have a balance between both. So there are newer technologies which they have to learn so that they are able to execute most of this. See, when work was centralized and everybody was sitting under one umbrella, or even different, you just had to sort of, do one thing, and somewhere you force that one size fits all. Today, you can't force it because people are not sitting in one location. Work is decentralized, responsibilities are decentralized, and there is nothing which was as before. So when business is not as before, when the environment is not as before, the HR policies can also not be as before. So you have to sort of keep, and the pace of change is at a very fast pace. Change is happening at a very fast pace. You have to keep running to be in the same place. And who has to be at the forefront? The HR. Then the leadership team, because whatever the HR does is what the leadership team is going to reap from there. So HR is at the front of this. So they have to adapt themselves first to the change in mindset. So it starts with the change in mindset. And HR has to change its own mindset as well as change the mindset of the frontline people or those middle managers who are going to be executioners of whatever the next has to happen. And there can be no digital EX or DEX until and unless the ones who are going to execute it are part of it mentally. So mindset has to change. New technologies have to be learned. The various tools which are there, those have to be utilized so that you can communicate at one go. You can have feedback at one go. You can also data points, analytics. There's a lot of data how do you analyze it? And how do you sort of, we say now we can torture data to get whatever type of results we want. But here you can't do that. You need to actually pick certain things verbatim, because that's what it is. And it's coming from a live resource. So along with data and analytics, you have to understand the various tools which are there. There are so many new HR softwares which can be used. So you have to keep changing and you have to keep adapting. So this is where the HR first needs to get rid of its past, whatever that they had been working on, because with the changing pace, they have to change themselves, the mindset, as well as the mindset of the others. So that is where, along with technology, the physical space, and digitally, there's a lot on platter, including privacy, anxiety about privacy and things like that. So this is again managed by the HR, obviously with support from the tech team, but HR is there on the force. So it is their baby, and how they manage it is totally in their hands, and they have to adapt themselves according to the fast changing pace.
Right. Anupreeta, that was well laid out. Sonal, taking on from where, Anupreeta was just speaking about disruptive technologies. And, we've seen a lot of organizations now use IoT, AI, ML, data-led decision making and all of that. How do you see these through the lens of an employee experience? And how do you think this will change organization strategies of employee experience?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that question, because it's real, it's live, it's here and now, and we all have to adapt to it. So, just building on what Anupreeta just mentioned, I think I also believe that HR teams have been phenomenal in the last couple of years, because, they've been at the center of what they have gone through, and they have been at the center of what people have been going through and understanding it and providing the kind of solutions. So big kudos to the HR team. I also believe absolutely the same. One of the things that, I would call out is for us to understand what's the pace of the change that we are dealing with. What's the scale of the change we are dealing with? Because every organization is dealing with some change. However, the pace could be different, and hence asking the question, saying, what's the pace of the change that we're dealing with? What's the scale of the change we're dealing with? Sometimes it's about not the entire organization, the same change. It could be about some parts of the organization where something is changing faster than the others. Third is, what is the impact of the change? And impact is in the form of, sort of the experience. Is it the form of money? Is it the form of the, sort of any other resource that we're talking about? And, lastly, is it we're building a competition because of this change, or are we learning through the change, right? So I would just say just the change is happening in the marketplace, and very important for us to understand. And what you spoke about, the technologies available, personally, if you ask me, it's changed my vocabulary from I think to I believe. And earlier I used to say I think because I had some hypothesis in front of me, but I don't believe I had enough data points to validate what am I saying. And hence, in the recent times, what has changed personally is there are hypotheses, because we are dealing with live resources like Anupreeta just mentioned, but then ensuring that we have data points collected. And the same happens with consumers and customers, but I'm speaking from a workforce perspective. So as an HR professional, am I able to get adequate data points available at different junctures to then create a valid hypothesis and say whether it will work or whether it will not work? And hence, my own vocabulary from I think to I believe. And the moment I say, oh, I think this is the way it is, I ask myself, oh, do I not have enough data points to actually validate what I'm saying? And I'll give 2-3 examples of how it worked, from an employee experience perspective. Some from my previous organizations and some from the current organization, right? So first example I'll give is from an example of a recognition. So is it enough recognition happening in the organization? Are there pockets of recognition happening in the organization? Are there certain behaviors only that we are recognizing as an organization, as a team? And we realized that actually once we started looking at the data on recognition, it became very clear on where the hotspots were and what was required to change. And hence what was required to change from a behavior perspective and the culture we would like to create. Because if the change is happening here, we can't recognize another kind of a behavior, right? So that was one area where actually using of data technology tools was very, very useful. The second is growth of our team members, right? And suddenly sometimes, there was a point in time that people said, hey, we are not growing enough of our colleagues. We're not growing enough. And it was an opportunity moment for us to deep dive in terms of what is growth meaning to us. Is it vertical growth? Is it horizontal growth? Is it an experience? Or what's the growth that we are learning, that we're talking about? And we realized the more and more data we started mining, it started becoming very valuable. And hence, it also connects back to the company. So if I work in a company X where vertical growth is extremely important, versus I work in a company B where horizontal experience is very important, and then matching and marrying it with what my employee expectation really makes it so clear with the policies and processes and programs that you would like to deliver. And hence, if your company philosophy and my company philosophy is saying, hey, I'll give you enough number of experiences that you want, but not the kind of vertical growth that you expect. And then hiring your talent, from the aspirations who actually look at and value more of horizontal experience, it will be more meaningful. Otherwise, you'll hire people with sort of vertical growth experience, and every 2 years, you'll only go through the churn. So how do you mix and match really from a I believe to, from a I think to I believe works very well. And third example is when you're actually having new age businesses, when you have new businesses which are still evolving, how do you create a performance culture? How do you create a culture where it's a high performing team, but anchored in the values that you have? And so on. So a couple of examples I'll give, and I'll give fourth example, which is real time that's happening right now, which is really around the chat GPT. And this is here and now. And for example, right now, all of us are experiencing what chat GPT means to us. So it's not just about one R&D team sitting out of a place who's only experiencing what means to have an experience of chat GPT, but I think it's all of us to experience. And I would encourage everybody listening to the program to some kind of generative AI experience. Chat GPT is just one method of doing it, but really understanding how does it changes and thinking. It's changed the way, like I've sort of felt in the last 3 weeks, as it's disrupting the whole world. For example, there are certain concepts that I felt, oh my God, I'm looking at Google search and it's not giving me the kind of, I've looked at some of the books, but it's not giving the kind of sort of understanding that I'd like. But actually, when I went through some of this generative AI, it was just so simple and so clear. So this is what people will experience. This is what the workforce will experience. And hence, in HR, it's so important for us to be ahead of the curve of how we are using it. Because when employees use it for their end customers and consumers, I think they also expect not like I think you have done well, I think you have a good skill, but they need very firm responses to, can you tell me where do I need to improve? How do I improve? They would come back and say, I already have it in me. So can you please now validate the hypothesis that it doesn't work for me? So, I believe we just need to be updated with a lot of this available, but I would just put a caveat saying not everything we need to adopt. I think we just need to be mindful of what works in the organization and is it creating that value for the workforce or not.
Right. So, it's just don't go headlong into technology, just, to sort of mimic what others are doing, but, really sift out what works for your organization and what works for your culture. So that's good. But Anupreeta, from the perspective of, say, employees, how do you see some of these technologies being used to monitor, or to manage employee productivity? There's already, I think, some sort of a dialogue, where systems look into, what employees are doing, whether they're actually working or not working. When we sort of work in a more digital sort of culture, what are the kind of trust issues that you think could emerge?
No, recently there was a survey by F-Secure, which found that about 67% of remote workers said that they were worried about security as well as privacy issues.
Right.
And this, when you compare in comparison to 58% of the workers who were working from office or anything else. Now, also, about 70% plus of the workers were worried about, their devices or the internet, which was, how it could lead to a breach of privacy. So that fear is there, and it's very much there. Also, we all know that during the pandemic, there was the employee surveillance softwares actually were sold 3x times than what they had been sold. Now, many of them were installed without the knowledge of an employee also. So there were certain sales monitoring data which were installed and the employee didn't know. Now, privacy, security, breach of trust, these are all that we can actually deal with in a separate manner. So I was saying that if we just take the privacy, if we deal with the privacy first, there are two aspects to it. One is where we deal with the hardware, where we can sort of, segregate the office devices from the home network, from the personal devices. We can segregate the network. We can ask employees to use VPN when working remote. So there are a number of steps which can be taken, keeping in mind the hardware. What that is not as sort of, scary when it comes to the emotional issues involved. So until and unless the emotional aspect of this privacy and the breach of data is sort of addressed, and that can be only addressed when we are very transparent. So organizations need to have a policy of extreme transparency where they convey to the employees or the workforce what is there, what are the softwares which are installed in devices, their usage, then the outcomes. So there could be a software which has been installed which could actually be taking care of the mental health of an employee, and that doesn't make him feel either worried or anxious. He or she is fine that, okay, this is going to nudge me in the right direction if I'm suffering from fatigue, or in case I start sleeping. We all know that in US the truckers, so there are neurotech devices which are installed, and and this is especially used in the transportation industry, the truckers who are driving long distance. So they are mapped, and in case they start dozing off on the street, these neurotech devices actually help them to stay awake. Now that is a plus for the organization as well as for the employee. But if we have some sort of a neurotech device which tells, hey, you're opening a FB page, you should be working on your Excel sheets, I'm not sure how the employee is going to actually react to it, because then nobody works 24/7. So again, we have to be very judicious about what is being installed, how we deal with this, and that we have to take them on the same page, explain in a very transparent manner what is, what works, what isn't, and take their feedback also, so that you can allay any fear of or any anxiousness about breach of privacy.
Sonal, now the last word is with you. When it comes to reimagining employee experience, what are the 2 or 3 challenges that you feel a lot of organizations, being part of so many organizations, and from your vantage, where do you think many organizations, face the stumbling block, and what are the 2 big things that organizations really need to do so that, they can carry forward, as Anupreeta said, their workers, where workers are also engaged and want to work with employers such as these?
Sure. No, thank you so much. It's the question which is very close to my heart. And I would say 2 things. One is agility. And agility also has become almost like a buzzword, but really understanding what is agility. And second, I heard and I read a very beautiful line somewhere which says, what is the difference between complicated and complex? And it says, if you actually get stuck with complication, there will be a huge amount of conflict because you don't know where to go. But if you actually get inspired by complexity, that's where innovation, creativity, and hope happens. And I thought it was a very beautiful sort of a depiction of complicated versus complexity, because complexity, if we are able to provide an opportunity to our employees to deal with complexity in a respectful manner, I think organizations and employees will thrive. But the moment we get into complications, that's where conflicts happen. That's where stress happens. That's where actually everything happens that brings the organizations down. And to me, both complication and complexity are inevitable because, the change is inevitable. It's happening right out there. And hence the organization's ability to be agile and deal with complexity and ensuring that people don't get caught into complications of work, conflict management, trust matters. Is it safe? Is it not safe? Am I growing? Am I not growing? Second morning I wake up and I don't know whether my job remains or my job doesn't remain, right? So to me, these are the two big areas I would say remains as a high priority, at least in my lens and perspective. And finally, I would just sort of conclude saying, keeping it precise, is whose life is becoming better. And if organizations can help create that narrative, and everybody's life has to become better. And again, it's an and narrative. It's not an or narrative. So is your consumer's life becoming better? Is your customer's life becoming better? Is your life as an employee becoming better? And is your family and loved ones' life becoming better? I think if we have an answer to deal with it, then we are able to deal with complexity and complication. And that can happen if we build an agile organization because change is inevitable. So that's what I will leave as the final thoughts.
So this good food for thought for a lot of organizations who are attempting to manage this shift, because it is a fairly complex shift for employers. It's also a complex shift when it comes to employees who are also straddling, this new way of working and the derivatives and that kind of come out of it. But Anupreeta Lall and Sonal, thanks so very much for joining us today and really, giving us so many thoughts to take home and to also ponder on how organizations can make it better for employees and what employees also need to do, to make to help their organizations and then to shine. Thank you so very much, both of you, for your thoughts and for your time today.
Thank you so much for having us here. Learning is all ours.
Thank you.
Well, that's it from all of us on the 2-day-long ET Future of Work Mini Virtual Summit. I'm Aloni Bhatt, and thank you so much for joining us. I hope the sessions were interesting and of help. We're very glad to have you here with us as we explore the future of work, jobs, education, and technology, and how, with everyone's efforts, we can attempt to make it sustainable and equitable. Do check out our social media handles, like and share all our interviews, and you can also catch the individual sessions on economictimes.com. But for now, thanks so much for watching and goodbye.